All right. Hi, everybody. This is Antero. I'm talking formally with my nemesis, Mark Gomez.
I'm still
Uh,
currently your nemesis. That should be stated.
all right. We'll start. That's where we start off.
That's where we start.
So Mark and I have known each other for a little over a decade at this point. We both went to school together to become teachers, and Mark is still teaching. Yeah, I'm not going to introduce yourself, Mark. Who are you?
Yeah, thanks. I am a teacher in Los Angeles, in the South Central neighborhood of Los Angeles. Currently working at a pilot school called Critical Design and Gaming School, where we focus on teaching students not only core curricular content areas, but also kind of mindsets and processes around games, game designers, and overall designers, right?
So is this a charter school? Is this a private school? Can you talk
It
about?
is a fully public, what we call a pilot school. So we serve all our neighborhood students, and we're fully open to the public. Yeah, we have charter-like autonomies around things like curriculum, assessment, to a certain extent budget, and calendaring, and staffing, and things like that.
And you said this. How long has the school been open?
We're going into our third year, and yeah, I was just there earlier this morning, so we have our freshman class in for orientation. We just graduated our first set of seniors this past June, so we're chugging along, trying to realize the missions of each of our small schools. So it should be noted that I'm one small school within the context of a larger campus, where there's 3 small schools, each with a specific career focus, like pathway.
And can you just briefly mention what the other 2 schools are?
Absolutely. Our sister schools are CHAS for short, which stands for the Community Health Advocate School. And we also have a school that's dedicated to the responsible indigenous and social entrepreneurial arts. So we call that school RISE. So more of like a business-oriented school.
So, Mark, I was briefly involved before I moved away with the kind of grassroots process, with the grassroots process of opening up these 3 schools. And there was a 4th school that kind of got axed at one point due to issues of space. And so knowing that, and kind of knowing that you've actually gotten to the place of getting these schools approved by the 2nd biggest school district in the country, and have now officially graduated a class of students. Can you talk about some of the lessons that you as a teacher in CDAGS and designer of CDAGS has learned along the way?
I think there's a perennial lesson that just keeps presenting itself, which is this job is really difficult. And I think in particular for CDAGS, it's also applicable to the other 2 schools, but opening your own school and building the systems from the ground up is incredibly challenging, yet it's oddly gratifying as well. So it's just overall, I think intense is the most appropriate word. I mean, anything from staffing, which, you know, from year 1 to 2, we increased our staff by almost, 50%, to creating buy-in and just overall knowledge of the actual mission of the schools and the career pathways, building capacity amongst both staff and students to try and understand what does it mean to be a game and design school, you know.
So let's come back to that question then. So being a game and design school, and in the context of this reaching a digital media and learning audience, like what does that look like in your classroom? As a history, as a social studies teacher, what do gaming and design have to do with your curriculum, with the design of a school? What happens in your classroom that could be different from in other classrooms?
Well, I think first and foremost, like just understanding the nature of games and play in society, and in the context of like education, not necessarily always just focusing on like learning games, but just the natural state of play that humans find themselves in, and when optimal learning happens. So it takes a lot of unpacking of old kind of traditionally held beliefs and practices, redefining key terms that kind of drive the schooling system, like failure and success and whatnot. Um, and it's a creative challenge for sure. So within the context of my classroom, it's looked different at different points, throughout the last 2 years. Actually, the first year I taught one section of the game design elective, which, before becoming a teacher at CDAGS, I wouldn't necessarily consider myself like a gamer, right? But through that experience, like really trying to understand the process for myself, as well as help students understand the process that not only the players go through, but that the game designers go through in terms of thinking about player experience and going through creative and design processes, and testing things out, and so there's just a whole set of things that I've learned in a short time, in having to be a teacher here at CDAGS.
Do you want to mention any of the specific projects? I know you're doing something called Community Planet. You're doing some kind of spatial analysis stuff in and around the community. Are there any projects in particular that kind of represent like a CDAGS ethos in your classroom?
Yeah, in my particular classroom, I got the opportunity to work with the Engagement Lab out in Boston through Emerson College, and there was a game platform that was designed to engage kind of civic discussion and participation around decisions in local community contexts. And the game was called CommunityPlanet.org. This past year, my students were able to use this online gaming platform twice. The first time to involve and build dialogue within the school context around issues of social media use and practices and policies at schools that allow or disallow student online activity, and what the ethics of that are, and all that. And then in the second semester, my students, along with some students in ninth grade geography classes at the other two schools, were able to be part of the actual design process for a game that they helped create and host to help reimagine what South Central Los Angeles could look like, right? So that in the context of my classroom, that looked like students thinking through appropriate challenge kind of questions, drafting them up, writing them, creating video content for the game, creating a kind of outreach plan to get more players involved in the game.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then I guess just to kind of start wrapping up, you start meeting with students again next week. Probably you'll be with students by the time a lot of people see this video. What are some of your goals going into this next year, the first year after students have already graduated from CDAGS? What's on the plate for the 2014 academic school year?
A lot is on the plate for CDAGS. We are, for the first time, offering a set of classes that haven't been offered before, and really trying to fine-tune our kind of four-year trajectory in terms of a course sequence that CDAG students would go through. So I'm actually, for the first time in many years, not going to be teaching ninth grade geography, where I've had a lot of freedom to adapt curriculum in different ways, to incorporate gaming and other types of things. Instead, freshmen will enter CDAGS and be taking exploring computer science. We're continuing, to have classes in game writing and developing and game design. We're even starting to steer our core classes into more. I know the word is kind of frowned upon in a lot of circles, but the more gamified context, right, where kids are exploring principles of geometry and algebra and history by playing and designing games, on platforms like Scratch and whatnot. And so I think we're closer to articulating what it looks like for CDAGS to implement game-based learning, wall to wall in a high school, right? I'm excited about my particular course I'll be teaching, which is a World History by Design course, where I made the argument earlier this year that we were putting a lot of energy and work into systematizing and having students have the opportunities to learn kind of the back end of multimedia games, which would be like coding and computer science stuff. And yet there's a huge dimension of just visual and aesthetic, like art, right? So that more the traditional kind of graphic design, conceptualizing of environments and characters and stuff. And I made the argument that we weren't really addressing that at that moment, and so we might be missing out on capturing the interests and passions of a lot of our students who may not be as technically or mathematically passionate as they are about creative and visual arts. So I think my goal in my history class is to kind of unlock that and use the modern history course to also teach basics and graphic design principles, which is what makes part of the job challenging, because we're in a situation in our district and probably throughout the country, a lot of people are experiencing this, where traditional electives like drafting, beginning architecture, beginning graphic design have been cut, for prioritizing just core subjects like math and English and social studies. So our challenge in speaking, we would talk to people in the industry, at pretty large gaming corporations. They were really interested in the project and what our school stood for, and their suggestions would have to keep getting transformed until they understood the fact that we were trying to take that sequence of courses that they were saying, like, oh, we'd have a course in lighting, and then we'd have a course in foundational shapes and theory, if you're talking about just the graphic design part of it, and getting them to understand that, okay, we're going to take all that and try to fit it into a history course, which is one course. So 4 courses now, really trying to become one.
That's awesome. Well, I wish we could keep talking about this. I think I will revisit with you later in the year to see where things have worked and haven't worked. But for now, thanks for talking to me, Nemesis Mark Gomez.
Come on out, and we'll school you up, Antero Garcia.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
All right.